now we are rolling.
Okay.
All right. We just wanted to start off this with a quick introduction for who you are to the audience you might not know.
Okay. My name is Judy Abdo, and I've been many things in my life, but the most famous one is former city council member and former mayor.
And as the when you were running for city council and mayor, what particularly was what were your fears going into running for mayor or city council?
Well, a lot of people had told me that it was probably not a good idea to run as an out lesbian um, because I was already out, so people knew that I was out. And so they thought that I was going to be attacked. Many people told me that they thought I would be attacked. As it turned out, nobody attacked me.
Well, we're glad that happened.
Right, and I will just say I talked to somebody who was against me along the way during that election, and I said, "Why wasn't I attacked?" And he said, "Because it would have been wrong." So that was 1988. So that's pretty dramatic, I think.
Yeah. And I guess on that topic, when we talk about that, one of the reasons why you ran was to represent Ocean Park. Um, how do you think what in relation to representing Ocean Park? Do you think that Santa Monica historically has been a place for doing what is right?
Well, at the time, historically, Smir had won the election for the very first time, uh, creating a majority of progressives in '81, and so I was running within that context of being part of the renters' rights group, and so I was thinking of myself as representing everybody in the whole community because we don't have districts. You know, it's all at large,
Yeah.
and
I guess
so I was thinking that I was representing not just Ocean Park, but uh, progressive thinking for the whole city.
wonderful. And I guess when you came to start running as a politician, what do you think that transition was like from being a community organizer into being a politician? Did you see any differences?
I didn't even think about being a politician. It just wasn't part of what I was thinking about. I just was being myself and running for city council.
Wonderful. And when you did get into city council, I know Phoebe, you want to talk about your question there?
Sure. So, how you were very involved in the community before and after, but how did you find being on the city council and being the mayor to be more or maybe less effective in seeing the changes enacted that you want to see in the community? Did you find it to be um, effective enough?
Well, I guess what was interesting at that time was all of a sudden progressives were the majority of the city council, and I was moving into that progressive group of electeds. So it felt really comfortable. I knew them very well, and I had been attending council meetings for quite a while, so I knew what was expected, and I was working part time for the church in Ocean Park, and Jim Kahn had been on the council for 8 years and was mayor for 2 of those years, and I was working with him along the way. So it didn't feel strange, I guess. It didn't feel like a change. It was just that now I was sitting there on the council.
May I ask, I know you were involved with the church in Ocean Park. Was that, I know it might have been more based on community rather than faith or belief in it?
The church in Ocean Park is not about faith. It's not about religion at all. It's about community organizing, and it still is, was then, and still is. So the people who are involved in the church in Ocean Park are not there because of religion at all, and I wasn't either.
That is fascinating. So there's no religious based element at all, no element of religious study. It's basically just a name, like equivalent to commune or collective.
So just briefly, the church in Ocean Park was closed, and for a couple of years. And the reason it was closed is that there was nobody really focused on participating within the Methodist Church, and so they closed it. And when Jim Kahn was appointed to the church in Ocean Park, he went to the bishop, and actually he said, "I want to be appointed to the church in Ocean Park, and I want to make it a community organizing church, not." I mean, he was pretty clear that he wasn't going to make it be about religion. And they agreed. The people who appoint agreed that that was okay. So, and that was in 73. So the church in Ocean Park was known as a sort of progressive neighborhood-based community organizing group, which was really different than what you would think of for a regular religious, organization. It just wasn't.
How would you compare your efforts in grassroots movements, community building, to what you were able to accomplish as mayor and advocacy?
Well, for all that work, both before I was on the council and while I was on the council, and actually after, it's all about building relationships with lots of people and working together. It's not about one person having an idea and then just making it happen. It's working together with people who want to bring progressive ideas into the organization, and that's really where we were on the council, even though we had won some elections along the way. In 81 is when we had the first majority as progressives and as supporters of renters. Before that, renters were just not considered active members of the community, and there was some truth to all of this. Before rent control, people would move into Santa Monica, would just live here for a little while and then move on in their lives. They didn't feel like they could stay here because they knew their rents would just keep going up, and so they couldn't move, and so what really changed when rent control happened was that people could move here, or if they were already living here, they could stay here knowing that they weren't going to be pushed out. They could make a decision to leave, but for the most part, that it was, a real change for people who were living here to know that they could build roots here. They could build a life here and stay here.
Yeah, I guess in relation to that, do you think that there is a direct connection creating strong communities and the rent control that we see on the ballots today?
Well, I think that a lot of what we see on the ballot today is about today, and it's about undoing some things that happened to rent control statewide that hurt rent control in Santa Monica at the time, and have continued. So this would change some of the the rules of rent control back to the way we had it before.
Sure, definitely. And Prop 33, of course, is a statewide proposition. Prop 5 is looking to more so help out local communities pass more tailored policy. When you were working with John in City Council, um, what was it like to build support for housing control, for rent control for these renters, and how do you think Prop 5 will change that?
It's really hard to know how the election's going to come out, and it's it's hard to spend time thinking about what could happen.
Yes.
Because we don't really know what's going to happen. Who wins the election for local city council members makes a huge difference about rent control and how rent control is operated from the city's point of view for the next 4 years, or at least 2 years. So it's really hard to say what changes could happen because we just don't know who's going to be there.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. And um, I guess at least for a lot of students, or the way it's being advertised to us, that a lot of these propositions, a lot of these politicians are like, or one solution for this. What is it actually like in the process of government to pass, rent control? Can you talk more so about what your work was like with John? And
Well, it's interesting because a lot of things are local, and the city council decides on local issues. But if the state decides to do stuff that affects local rules or laws, then the city doesn't have any ability to say, no, we're not going to do that, because the state law kind of supersedes everything else. So it's been interesting, particularly recently, because of housing. The city was supposed to have a housing element that was approved by the state. The city council majority decided not to follow the state rules about that. And so they didn't, so the housing element did not coincide with what the state was asking. So what happened was that the state decided they would take over the ultimate rules for housing in Santa Monica, because we didn't have a legal housing element. And the council was told that, but they decided to submit a housing element that wasn't legal from the state's point of view. So that's kind of where we are now. The state said, okay, this is not okay. We're going to take over the rules. And basically what they did was they made it much more possible to build lots and lots of units and lots of floors of housing. And the rules that the state has are very, very different from what the city had before. And so now it's going to be interesting to see what happens at after the next election, but we can't really predict.
sure. Yeah. And zoom in but also zoom out. I know that's going to sound a little confusing, but for our viewers, can you just talk about why, in your opinion, it's so important to follow local politics and your local politicians, or vote for them?
Well, for people who live in Santa Monica, what happens in Santa Monica matters to them. And whether they are aware of how much it matters or not, it does really matter about how life is in our community. And so paying attention to what is happening is always really important, because it's going to affect living here and being here. So I think that's the reason to stay very involved, not just at election time, but meeting after meeting after meeting, which they're on YouTube. You can watch it. You don't have to go and sit in council chambers. You don't have to testify, but if you pay attention to what's going on, it's really important to know what's happening in your own community.
Yeah, definitely. And um, I guess as a little tidbit, I'd like to ask: is there anything that surprised you when you went into government, that like, oh, we can have control over this, or we can have direct influence on this, that like a local regular citizen will like probably not know?
I pretty much knew how it all worked because I had been close to the council majority before me. So and then for some of us, we would talk about, well, what do we want to accomplish within the next year or the next 2 years, and we would make plans to do things together. Now we couldn't get a majority of the council to agree to something in advance, because that's against the rules. But 2 or 3 council members can have an agreement and hope that they get others to support. Because the Brown Act doesn't allow you to talk outside of the public meetings. So the council members can meet 2 or 3 at a time, but not a majority, not 4 people.
I've noticed a lot in the community about a lot of concerns, specifically about Prop 33. A lot of divisive opinions. People are concerned with balancing rent control and the development of housing. Um, with your experience in the Santa Monica government, what do you think is actually more pertinent in this proposition? Like the possibility of rent control or the possibility of housing ceasing?
Well, I think both are really important. And what is going to happen with rent control is uh, all about Prop 33, whether it's going to be kind of pushed back to the way it was at the beginning, or at the beginning of rent control, or is it going to be continue to have the changes that were actual changes that benefited landlords, not tenants? And we don't know. We just don't know which way it's going to go.
Obviously, it's, as you said, heavily dependent on who is elected into the local offices. With your experience in the Santa Monica government, what do you think are important qualities for leaders to have, or legislative goals for them to have?
Well, what I would like is that people would have some kind of historical basis for knowing how the city is now, which means looking at big decision points and why decisions were made along the way they are. Whether people agree with them or not, it's more what kind of decisions were made along the way that made Santa Monica the way it is right now. And that has to do with zoning, and where what laws are basically pushed against and which ones are absolutes, you know, that you have to follow this legal path.
Okay, perfect. I guess in general, from the beginning of this interview to just right now, you're talking about how your work is always continuing. Before you were in office, and now after you're after office. We want to transition then to like Proposition 3. Um, when as the first out mayor of Santa Monica, can you just give a little bit of your context on Proposition 3 and your feelings about it?
Well, I don't know how to talk about Proposition 3 in general, but I can talk about what it is, you know, what LGBTQ things are going on in the city. I do know more about that. It's I told you that many people told me I should not run and as an out lesbian. This election, we have the first out person running again. So I ran in '88, and Dan Hall is running now, and nobody has been an out LGBTQ in between. So that's a long, long time where it was not an issue, an electoral issue. Of course, LGBTQ issues arise all the time, but so it's kind of alarming to me that nobody ran as an out person in between. It just didn't happen.
Um, sorry, I didn't realize how long of a time. That's really taking me aback. Um, yeah, I guess in context to Prop 3, one of the reasons why um, it's on the ballot this year is because, as you know, unfortunately, in 2022, um, Clarence Thomas put a little note that they will also that the Supreme Court should also reconsider gay marriage at a Supreme Court level. Um, I just wanted if you can talk a little bit about that, not necessarily in context of every way, but just in context to on a national level, how you feel about um, you know when you ran, it was a not a problem, but now it seems as if it's back on the voting ballot. And,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think if if the Supreme Court decides to do something to, I don't know what they would do, whether they would invalidate or whether they would just say in the future there can't be gay marriage. I don't know what they would do. But if they do something along those lines, it's going to organize everybody all over the country who cares about this issue into working on the issue. Right now, we're kind of okay, you know, in we're in support of really good things happening, but this would be a very specific targeted attack, whatever it ends up being, and people would respond all over the country, I think.
Yeah. Those were our questions for Prop 3 and Prop 3, 5, and 33. So we want to zoom back out again. Are there for this election, specifically for Santa Monica students, I guess, what do you want to tell them after their election, regardless of the results that come out in the next few days?
Well, what I want to say basically is you must vote. No matter what, you must vote. And that's important whether you live in Santa Monica or somewhere else, or you know what your position is about anything in national politics. It's just really important to vote. And that would be my major message. Um, After the election, things are going to be really different one way or another, and we don't know how different they're going to be, and we don't know nationally what would happen, and we don't know locally what would happen. So it's really hard to say this week anything about next week. We just don't know. We have strong opinions, but we don't know.
Wonderful. Do you have any questions that you'd like to relay?
Yeah, just maybe going back to, something more uplifting. What do you think is the best thing you accomplished while the mayor, while as the mayor?
Well, I think one of the things that happened when Smir had was elected as a majority, and even a little bit before that, is that the city decided to be funding um, nonprofits to do whatever the nonprofit was doing, and they made a program that would be um, supported by the city, not only financially, but the council would decide not only if they wanted to support an organization, but how much money to put into that organization. And of course, the city staff would come with proposals, and the council would decide. So one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we expanded the the whole idea of the city funding nonprofits along the way. And that, I think that that's really important, not only because the nonprofits do wonderful work, which they do, but it also involves a whole lot more people in this into the city process. And that's really important because each of those organizations has a whole constituency of people they serve.
Representation is the most important part. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Um,
But I guess one of the things that I specifically was able to do was to start working on the environmental issues that were just being talked about at that time when I was on the council. It was not a given. Climate change was not a thing, um, and I brought together some people who really wanted to organize around environmental issues. And so we started an environmental task force. And that happened when I was mayor. And that now is the sustainability, they've got lots of words in there, but the Sustainability Commission. Yeah. So all along the way, work was being done, important work was being done in whatever the group was called at the time, environmental task force or whatever. And also, city staff was very focused on what was going on in environmental issues because we had a task force. So that's a major thing that I worked on that happened.
that's great. That's great. Just a random question. By any chance, you know Chaperone?
What?
She is a LGBTQ uh, singer songwriter at the moment who is like really blowing up, and she has a very popular song where she talks about like I'm in Pink Pony. You know what's Pink Pony Club? Pink Pony Club, and she says I'm going to Santa Monica. I'm leaving my home and I'm finding a place in here. Um, just hearing that, how do you feel about pop icons finding Santa Monica as like a safe haven for them.
Well, I'm thrilled that somebody would say very publicly that this was a very good place for those kinds of ideas. I think along the way, from the beginning of Santa Monica to the present and into the future, because of the movie industry and the music industry, we have been a very central kind of place. Everybody in the world knows about the pier, for instance. It's just a known thing. And most cities don't have a thing that everybody in the world knows about, right? So we're very special in that way. And I think it's really important that people be able to express their opinions about what's going on here.
Perfect. All right. If I'm all done, are you?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. This is a great opportunity. Thank you so much for
Sure, anytime.
It's great
Anytime.
talking to you. Shiro, do you have any questions yourself? All right. Sounds good.